Hello chums, and welcome to episode 6 of the Mid-2000s Supercar Shootout, where I gather the most desirable motor vehicles from 20 years ago and subject them to a series of challenges. The 14 contenders have now been through several tests across several videos. In the first 3 episodes, the cars were unmodified and were rated on their top speed, fuel economy, acceleration, braking, lap time, and subjective feel. For episode 4, the cars were all upgraded to 700 performance points and tested for their tyre wear. In episode 5, the upgraded cars were tested again for fuel economy to see how the modifications affected things. If you haven't yet seen those videos, I highly recommend watching them first. To summarise what's happened so far, the top speed test had some fairly obvious results, with the Veyron, Enzo and Corvette making up the top 3 spots, while the Ford GT impressed by coming in 4th. The Lamborghini Gallardo was the only real surprise, with its close ratio gearbox making it one of the slowest cars here. The fuel economy test threw up some more varied results. While it was mostly a reverse of the top speed test, the Lamborghini Gallardo again scored no points, while the Corvette, and to a much greater extent the Ford GT and Dodge Viper, achieved excellent fuel economy. In episode 2 I ran a standing start test, adding the 0 to 60, 0 to 100 and 400 meter times together to give points based on the lowest overall. The Gallardo finally scored points, coming in 3rd, while the usual heavy hitters took the rest of the top spots. The biggest shock here was the Mercedes-Benz SLR, underperforming and scoring no points. I then ran a braking test from 150 miles per hour, which the SLR won, while the Ford GT scored no points for the first time. In episode 3, I took the supercars around one of Lake Maggiore's shortened versions for a time trial. Annoyingly, the Bugatti won despite being atrocious to drive. The Gallardo came an impressive 4th, while the Mercedes SLR once again underperformed, only just beating the Dodge Viper of all things. I then rated each car based on subjective driving feel, which isn't really anything more than my irrelevant opinion. Either way, the SLR redeemed itself for being an absolute hoot to drive, while the Murcielago scored points for its V12 engine sound, and the Ferrari 430 outperformed for being one of the best all-rounders. In episode 4, the supercars became racing cars as I upgraded them to 700 performance points. After reintroducing the contenders, all gussied up in their new liveries, I put each car through a tyre wear test, since it's unlikely you'd be entering unmodified cars into races with tyre wear. Unsurprisingly, the Bugatti, Mercedes SLR and Lamborghini Murcielago suffered with the worst tyre wear, while the TVR Tuscan, Ferrari 430 and Ferrari Enzo did well. But the biggest surprise was the Chevrolet Corvette outright winning the test. In episode 5, I ran the fuel economy test again to see how the various engine and weight upgrades affected each car. The Bugatti Veyron had lost 200 horsepower and 400 kilograms, which meant it actually improved its fuel economy compared to before, and the same goes for the Enzo and the SLR McLaren, both of which managed a respectable figure. The Lamborghini Murcielago, meanwhile, was very last indeed. One of the bigger surprises was that the top 4 remained exactly the same as the stock test. Meanwhile, the Audi R8 that came 6th before was now 11th. We also have something of a running joke at this point, because the Chevrolet Corvette is the only car to have scored points in every single round so far. Shall we see if it can continue that trend? Since the fuel economy retest brought up some interesting results, I also decided to return to the top speed test to see how much closer the field is now that all of the cars are set up to the same limitations. As before, a custom race at Route X has been set up with no wind conditions. The speed towards the end of the first straight is measured. The slowest car last time was the TVR Tuscan, which managed 187 miles per hour, while the Bugatti Veyron won, cruising to 253 miles per hour. For those wondering, I haven't made any changes to the setups for these cars other than gear ratio adjustments. These cars are optimised for the track, as is more likely at 700 performance points. This time out there was a tie for the slowest car, and rather sadly, the Dodge Viper is one of them, managing 207 miles per hour. As you might have expected, the TVR Tuscan is the car that tied with it, also managing a rather disappointing 207. One of the biggest shocks already was the Porsche Carrera GT, which only went 1 mile per hour faster than the Tuscan and the Viper. Matching it is the much cheaper Alfa Romeo 8C, though it's still too far down in the order to score any points. Managing 210 miles per hour, we have the Ferrari 430 Scuderia. Matching it is the Porsche 911 GT3, which is even less powerful still. Like I said previously, Porsche 911s are overachievers. The Ferrari Enzo seems to possess some slippery aerodynamics because it manages 213 miles per hour despite being one of the least powerful cars here. Just beating it, we have the Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren, managing 214 miles per hour, a solid midfield result for the underachieving Bruiser. Ahead of the Big Merc, we have the baby Lambo. The Gallardo creeps up to 216 miles per hour. A slightly bigger gap separates the Gallardo from its bigger brother. The Murcielago reaches 221 miles per hour. Matching it, we have the Audi R8, which will be given the higher point score by virtue of it being cheaper. Only just beating it, the Bugatti Veyron just edges up to 222 miles per hour, unfortunately. However, it is beaten by the Ford GT, which uses its very low drag to big advantage to reach 223 miles per hour, despite being over 130 horsepower down on the glorified Volkswagen. Now, you may have noticed that I didn't mention the Corvette. Well, that's because I'm a prick, and I wanted to build some suspense. At 576 horsepower, there are only 3 cars with less power at this performance point limit: the Tuscan, the 911 GT3, and the Enzo. So, does the Corvette score points again? Only just. 212 miles per hour places it in 8th, meaning the Corvette scores 1 point, but it still means its record stands unvanquished. So we finally have a good result for the Audi R8, and the Ford GT wins its first test. The Veyron, despite still being by far the most powerful car, loses out on the top spot and almost missed out on the top 3 since it very much struggled to outdo the big Lambo and the Audi. It goes without saying that there are a lot of variables to this test depending on how the cars are set up. You could add more weight to get more power and a higher top speed as a result, for example. The majority of these cars have been set up in more or less the same way though, so it's mostly representative. So, what's it done for the scores? A win for the Ford GT brings it level with the Corvette, rounding out the top 5. The Bugatti Veyron rather annoyingly retakes the lead from the Enzo, and at the other end of the spectrum the Audi R8 drags itself out of last place. A good result for the big Lambo places it into a middle ground between the 2 leaders, and the gaggle of midfielders. So, that was episode 6 of the mid-2000s Supercar Shootout. Join me next Friday for the next episode. Is there a test that you want to see carried out on these cars whilst in their 700 performance point guise? Do let me know in the comments below. Did you enjoy this video? Then please like, subscribe and smack my bell so you get notified of my future uploads. Take care of yourself, and ta-ra.